other stuff.
Don't panic.
Don't panic. I'm panicking right now. No, well, hey everybody, welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you. Not planned out today at all. We are free flowing. It's going to be really good. Now, while I am panicking, y'all shouldn't be. Like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff. Get your emails whenever we shoot this up because we're not live anymore. So now we're here. I don't have any plan. I don't have anything to say other than that. Let's kick this off. How was your guys' New Year's? Shaun, how about yourself?
It was good. We did our usual shtick. The whole family was here, and we just kind of hung out down in our basement and watched movies. We decided this year to go with Lord of the Rings, the trilogy, which we never finish because the first two are so freaking long. And we chose the extended version. So the second movie extended version is 4 hours long. So we made it to midnight with Lord of the Rings, almost finishing up the second movie. And as per usual, we looked at each other and said, man, how come we never get to watch the third movie? Because it's freaking a long series. So like most years, we still haven't watched the third movie for the trilogy. And just sat around, ate popcorn and all the usual stuff, hung out together.
Yeah, those are, you need, like, that's an all day affair. Like, to get through all three extended versions of Lord of the Rings that's almost 12 hours worth of movies. Like, it's, and bathroom breaks and all the other stuff. Seb, what was your night like?
Yeah, that's 19 bathroom breaks for anybody that's like me. And Shaun, I'm surprised at your age. I would think you would want to, squeeze in shorter movies, more of them.
Dude, electrolyte. I just go hard on the electrolytes to retain everything.
Yeah, no, for me, it was kind of business as usual as well. For the last decade, I've been in bed at 9:30, 10, watching TV by myself. Or with the girlfriend or whatever the case may be. In this case, of course, Alex. And it was no different this year. So we did a little family thing before. We went to our brother's place with the kids for a little bit, and then we stayed there for about 2 hours, which is where my people skills start dwindling. And we exfilled out of there, went back home, and we just laid there and watched some motivational videos on YouTube and had some great conversations, and that's essentially what happened.
Nice. Real chill. Trav, what was your night
Love
like?
it, Seb. You do the fade. You can recognize when you've peaked, time to go. They get the best of me. I love it. 9:30, that's about when I went to bed. I don't do the New Year's Eve thing. I don't go out and go crazy. Was up around 2:30, and I think that was started a bit of a conversation here in the green room, which I'm interested to plug away at. It was a good day. I went out flying. A buddy of mine bought an airplane and just got himself licensed, so I was his very first guinea pig and very first passenger in an airplane with his brand new license, and he did good. We didn't crash. That's all good. But yeah, 9:30 in bed, up around 2:30. I've been doing that for months now, and I was saying to Seb earlier, I was like, well, what is this? Am I getting older? Like, is this a normal thing? And man, you had some crazy insight I want to hear more on.
Let's do it. Seb, hit it.
Yeah, man. I mean, there's and again, I'm not a subject matter expert in this domain, but I have done a lot of research because just like Travis, I've been waking up at 2:30 for probably 4 months at least, and we're talking very strangely, not laying there and slowly waking up and being groggy or anything like that. I'm talking about being completely asleep and ready to take on the world, like as if done.
Yep.
And I'm literally capable, or I would be capable, because I generally don't, but to go downstairs and do work and go train and do all those things, like I'm 100% refreshed. Now you might think, well, if you go to bed at 8, that's what you might expect, but I don't. I go to bed around 10 at the very minimum, but sometimes at 12. And even if I fall asleep at 1, at 2:30, I'm up just like that. And it is the weirdest thing. Now, this happened to me a couple of years ago, probably 7 or 8 years ago. And it was 2:30 as well. And so I'm making some connections here. So I was doing a bit of research, and depending where you look, obviously, if you have a bit of knowledge about it, you might be cognitively biased and you might find what you want to see. But I just kind of looked at it without knowing what any of this entailed. And I found a very interesting old calendar that speaks to at what time certain condition will wake you up at. So when I say condition, I mean if say for example,
Liver?
where,
Was it liver?
what's that?
Was it the liver?
Yes, yes. Good man. So basically, one of those is speaking to where you store your stress, and depending what type of stress you're experiencing, it's being stored in different areas of your body, and we know this being through scientific research as far as like women, keeping their stress in the upper chest and lung area, which often will translate into lung cancer or breast cancer later down the line. And there's all kinds of really interesting stuff that's actually scientifically proven, but none of this is I have extensive knowledge in. But suffice to say that we do store stress in different areas of our bodies, and if you have a certain type of stress, then it's the liver. For example, between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock. If you wake up during that time frame, it's believed that you're experiencing a certain type of stress that leads to that. And there's several reasons for that. And if I look at the type of stress that I'm experiencing at the moment, and if I compare it to the type of stress I was experiencing at the time, they both are very in line. And so it seems as though that this is probably exactly what it is as far as I'm concerned. And the fact that I'm ready to work and do certain things to me is essentially my way of dealing with anxiety and stress, which is to go into exploration and to turn and face the storm. And so that would make sense that I wake up and I'm sort of ready to engage with the day and get moving and explore.
Interesting, Shaun. What are you thinking on this?
Well, I had the exact same thing a few years ago. And so I was the 0230 guy and pop up straight, just like you. And I did my research as well. And that's why I know it's liver, or that's why I'm proposing there's a high probability it's liver. And so there's a bunch of things that you can do to kind of address that, and reducing your stress, reducing all the things, making your life more awesome, and all of that good stuff, and it will maybe sort it out. But what I had to do was go to a Chinese medicine acupuncturist, which I've been going to for. In fact, I just mentioned it in my live podcast there the other day on IG that I was heading down to see my acupuncturist, who I see twice per month. And so since, I don't know, since I left Tier 1, since I got out of the military, I've been trying to figure a whole bunch of things out, to include why 0230. So I'd go to various acupuncturists throughout the years. And one of the first things that they would always say to me is, "Oh, your liver." Always my liver, man. Always my liver. And I've probably seen plus easily over 20 acupuncturists in my life. And whether they ask me a lot of questions beforehand or whether they ask me zero questions beforehand, the moment they feel my pulse, the moment they look at my tongue or look at my eye, or whatever they do to read my energetic state is immaterial. One of the first things they say is liver. And so they might get to work on me a little bit, or it might be a lot depending on where I live in the world at the time. But here in Rossland, I've been seeing my acupuncturist for, again, at least 5 years. And that's what she works on mostly is I've got, hang on a sec. Oh, geez, I don't have it here with me. I do have some pills, and they are Chinese medicine pills, I'll call it loosely. But what it is a bunch of herbs. And of course, you can grab a precise, not a supplement, but a precise concoction or a number of different herbs stacked up. And I'll try to look for it while I'm not talking, and show you what I'm talking about. And that product helped kind of calm down, we'll call it the fire in my liver. And so you can have kind of a depressed liver or an anxious liver or a hot or a cold or a wet or a dry. There's all these various indicators of how you can be sort of out of balance, specifically with liver. And so there's concoctions you can take, or there's needle patterns that will help reduce this sort of impact. And so I used to wake up at 0230 hours. Now I don't wake up at 0230 hours. And that took a combination of her working on my, we'll call it my energy meridians, and the concoction that she scaled up for me that I took that kind of happened to wipe away that 0230 thing.
When are you waking up now?
I wake up at a kind of I was going to call it a regular time or a normal time. But right now I'm waking up still a bit jet lag time, believe it or not, from coming back from Asia. But typically I'll wake up around, I'll wake up when I wake up. So I don't need to set alarms anymore. And I don't have to be in bed by a certain time. So I'll go as late as I want on whatever I'm working on. And then when I'm tired, when I feel my body is ready to hit the sack, then I go hit the sack. And then I don't set an alarm unless I've got timings to meet. And I'll wake up naturally whenever I wake up. And then, I'll get on with my day. So I try to let my natural body do what it wants to do unless I've got timings to meet.
That's interesting. Trev, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I got so many questions. So, I mean, it's been months waking up. It's started off around 0330. That was when I was waking up almost every day on the number. Then around 0230, like Seb's saying, I'm awake, I'm good to go. And I either A, don't go back to sleep, I'll just go out and I'm productive, or B, if I do get back to sleep, I'll have a restful sleep. But why do I have that broken period in there? So if it's a liver thing or we're storing stress, question would be, why? Why is being stored in the liver? Why does your body store stress in different places? How do you empty that, aside from like the obvious of exercise and mindfulness and all of these other things? Because clearly trying those things, I'm still getting up. And then, we were talking before about binaural beats, certain frequencies, 432 hertz. I haven't played around with that much. I'm interested to know if that's been a successful tool in something that you've used, Seb, or if it's just something you're exploring at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So how this all came about, I think setting the tone a bit for that conversation is critical. But so I went to a sound bath, and I had done breath work before, psychedelic breath work, and I did breath work in the context of a sound bath, which, uses instruments that create frequency. And I think that instruments, that is, because there's various frequencies used during a sound bath. But I think suffice to say that without getting too deep into this, every being or everything that's material is made of atom, right? Or atom, or how do you say that word? Atoms. Yeah, that's right. Sorry, French in me. So that's a really difficult word to say, by the way, for an ESL. So those things are vibrating. They're vibrating, and everything vibrates. We're all made of these things that vibrates incessantly. And when something is in tune with a vibration, it makes it better. When something is out of tune with a vibration, it actually interferes with the process. And so there are various vibrations that are very well known to be in tune with the Earth's vibration. And I can't remember what it is, 7.3 or 8 or 4, something like that, a multiple of 4, I believe. And then along the way, as you go up in the Hertz frequencies, you have various benefits for various vibrations. And this isn't a sort of wazoo kind of crazy, far-fetched scenario. This is the University of, where was it? Not Australia. One of the European university, I'll find it's either Germany or somebody else wants to look it up, has done a research project and 2 massive baseline of individuals in 3 different rooms, one in a 432 Hertz, one in a 440 Hertz, which is typically known as being out of sync with human vibrations, and another one that's kind of like neutral. So you have the 432 hertz, which is very beneficial to humans, the 440, which is out of tune, and then the other one that's neutral. And they were able to corroborate that without knowing which room they were in. all the people in the 432 rooms felt a certain way. They felt much better than everybody else. They reacted to cognitive testing better than everybody else. And anyway, all of those things. And so we know that is a thing. And thankfully, everything in the age of information, we can pretty much reach and find anything we want. So I started doing some YouTube research just to find a frequency, and they're associated with black screens. So you get the frequency that you want to try, and there's a description of it. So this is, promotes healing, or promotes, mindfulness, or promotes deep thoughts or lucid dreams. And if you do not believe this, just try it. You will see how crazy it is. The lucid dreams one, I've been having some crazy dreams, but not just me. Alex, my girlfriend, exactly the same. So we wake up and we essentially tell stories of the lucid dreams we've gotten. She wasn't aware of which frequency I selected. I selected the lucid dream frequency without telling her, to see if there was anything that could come out of that. She never remembers her dream. But those nights that I picked up the frequencies, every morning she's had some lucid dreams. Now, funny story, a couple nights ago, I was blasting the lucid dream one, and my dog went crazy. So it was having dreams. You know how dogs are having dreams, and they're making these little noises, and they're dreaming. He was all out fighting in there. Like, I don't know what he was doing in there, but I tried to record him, and of course he stopped doing it as soon as I pressed the record button. But it's kind of like that frog in the cartoons, and the singing frogs.
Yeah.
So anyways, what happened was, Achilles, my dog, was going nuts in his crate. He was sleeping. He was dead sleeping, but he was just obviously having some very intense lucid dreams. So I'm assuming that, he reacted as well. But so what I can say to this is this: it hasn't kept me asleep past the 2:30 mark. I still wake up at the 2:30 mark, but historically I haven't been going back to bed after I wake up. I just incapable of. With the vibration, I have every single time so far. So every single time so far, I was able to go back to bed and fall asleep deeply, get into realm, do all of this stuff. And if I don't put an alarm on, I can sleep until 8 or 9, which is unheard of for me. I've never done that in my adult life. And so I've been playing with a lot of these things right now to try to figure out how I can tweak, but there's more to it. There's healing frequencies. There's all kinds of stuff. So imagine, we're always talking about mental health for men, but we hardly ever talk about physical health for men. Men are horrible at taking care of their physical health, as far as doing certain things preemptively, or even seeing the doctor. All those conversations are super taboo, and I think that there'll be a ton of value in launching into this at some point. But the point I'm making is, imagine if you were to have a nap for, I don't know, 20 minutes. And so you do your 20-minute nap, because we know that's extremely beneficial, and you play a vibration. And I've been doing that in all of my nap times. Now, what I used to do when I napped for 20 minutes is I would still wake up slightly groggy. Whereas with the vibrations, I wake up 100% refreshed and good to go. It's been mind blowing. And I'm not talking about a small difference. I'm talking about, I'm two different humans. So there has to be some, the research is continuing to try to see where I'm going to go with this next. But there's a ton of time you can go down some severe rabbit holes on that.
Interesting. Shaun, speaking of rabbit holes, what do you got?
Well, I have been down a few rabbit holes on this subject, and so I'll get to that in a sec. I just want to reinforce what Seb just said, and that is, back to my acupuncturist, when she's putting needles in me twice per month, she's got some tuning forks at fixed frequency. She's got a whole set of them that she will use. And she's also got some Tibetan singing bowls of various sizes that she will use specific frequencies on me or together as we're sharing an energetic space. And she will sync me up. She'll vibe me up. She'll adjust me not only with needles, but she'll use frequencies as well. Now, does that sound weird to someone out there? For sure it does, because it used to sound weird to me at one point. But that was a long time ago when I didn't understand any of this stuff. And so back to Seb's point, like, how deep does the rabbit hole go? Well, I guess it depends on how deep you want to go. And so the idea of a frequency causing some sort of an adjustment within your physiological or emotional or psychological state, you can look into lucid dreaming, but lucid dreaming at one point will probably take you to something called remote viewing. And so remote viewing is not lucid dreaming. And so you can start creating some lucid dreaming within your life, and then you can start exploring something called remote viewing. And so what that will allow you to do is better interact with your, I don't want to call it controlling your sleep state, but better understanding your sleep state by giving you something to work on or explore on or adventure with to see if you can or can't remote view. Now, I'm not suggesting that by the end of today you're going to be remote viewing based on this afternoon's nap. You perfected lucid dreaming, and by a 24-hour cycle later, you're the master of the universe on remote viewing. That is not going to be the case. By the end of today, you might understand a tiny bit about lucid dreaming and a tiny bit about remote viewing. But what you will understand by the end of today, if you just spend even 30 minutes researching, is that there's an entire different world that you have yet to explore, just like so many other things in life. There's so many worlds to explore. Once someone puts it in front of you, dangles the carrot in front of your nose and says, have you ever considered pursuing this carrot? And that could take you the rest of your life. If you're passionate and curious and adventurous, you could spend the rest of your life just considering lucid dreaming or remote viewing or anything to do with sleep. And that's just sleep. And so maybe throughout today's episode or conversation, we'll talk about a bunch of things, a bunch of carrots, a bunch of stuff that maybe you've never heard of before, or perhaps you've just heard of it in the background and never gave it a moment's consideration beyond that, just because you heard it from a person who you thought, what do they know? Well, the guest panel knows a few things. And so maybe we'll come up with a few things today that you can sink your teeth into by the end of the day and start a curious 2024.
Always good to start curious. Trav, what do you
Follow
I know
the white-
I know you've been sitting there like madly taking notes. What do you got?
Well, I got 3 pages here so far, so I'm going to try and condense it. But, yeah, follow the white rabbit, Shaun. I've never. I will set an alarm to wake up. I've never really needed that alarm. I'll always wake up before my alarm, whether it's 1 minute or 2 minutes. I'll wake up before the alarm. This whole getting up at 02:30, 03:30, it's kind of a pain in the arse. I like some of the practicable takeaways that we can use here, and I'd really love to hear anybody who's listening if they have thoughts or ideas or suggestions that work for them. I've heard some people talk about, I think it was cinnamon tea with honey and a few other things. I've tried it, didn't make a difference. I'm going to try the different frequencies, but that whole white rabbit carrot rabbit hole thing kind of makes me think of, Shaun, when I was sitting in your kitchen there and we wrapped up the podcast, and I essentially made some comment along the lines of manifest destiny. I said, I don't know if it's something where we have such a direct effect over everything that goes around us through our thoughts, through our actions, or if it's that we later on look back at it and have a cognitive bias and say, oh, all of this happened because, or all these puzzle pieces fit because, and we figure it out. Whatever the reason being, there does seem to be a natural order to things. And I think you made a comment about it because I said, it's interesting. You set your mind to something, you achieve it time and time again. And I think I said it's sort of like being in the Matrix. Are we in the Matrix? Are we creating our own realities? And what effect do we have? And you said, I believe we do. And right at this moment, we're in your reality. And in the next moment, we're going to be in some other reality. I thought that was really interesting way to look at it. And we never did expand on that conversation. But I think it kind of plays into the frequencies. I think it plays into this whole either cognitive bias, looking backwards and saying, yeah, it all added up, or are we building it ahead of ourselves? I'd like to hear a little bit more on that.
It's an interesting spot to start, Shaun. What do you got?
Well, I mean, the collective is a good example of this. I mean, a year ago we started off with 0 episodes, and then 365 episodes later. Looking backwards, is that reflecting on a year that just went by and, oh, it all kind of panned out? Or a year ago, looking into the future and manifesting it as if it's a done deal? Oh, I know it's already done because I've already stated in my mind that it's done, and therefore it is. And so, which one is it? Are we looking into the future, or are we looking back into the past? I guess it depends on how you've been running your life up to now. This is what I do know for sure, that I say for sure, this is what I think. I think that in the moment we have constant choices, and any second that we're living in is a branching point. Go left, go right, go up, go down, go in, go out. It doesn't much matter, but it's generally a binary choice that we're constantly facing every single second. And I think that the binary moment is what carves our present, of course, but it is in some way illuminating the past, and in some way it's illuminating the future. And so I try to be more careful nowadays with my choices, but I try not to strategy or tactic it too much. In fact, very little as compared to how I used to do things. Now I just try to be in the moment. I just try to be present. And here it comes. I just try to vibe. I try to understand the synchronicity of the moment. I try to understand who I'm with, what we're talking about, what the color of the sky is. I understand all of those things. But most importantly, number one for me nowadays is feeling the energy, feeling the vibe of the moment, feeling the interconnectedness of what is happening in that moment. And so I'll know the color of the sky. I'll know whether it's snowing or not, but they're all just like data points to me that are not curiosities, but they're realities that have no bearing per se on what I'm feeling. They're just observational moments in the external world. And the moment that I'm looking at, if it's you, Travis, in my kitchen, that moment, what I'm doing is I'm feeling the moment and observing my surroundings. So I think that for me anyway, I have to be very clear that I capture all of the bandwidth around me in the external world, but my biggest priority or my most interesting fascination or the thing that I find to be most useful for Shaun is the vibe, the energy, the frequency of the moment. So that's where I spend a lot of my time with frequency, as we were talking about, whether it's tuning forks or Tibetan singing bowls, or whether it's a digital harmony that you can find on the internet that is a specific frequency. All of these things I think they're choices that we're also making. You either believe it or you don't. So there's a choice. So let's say you believe it. Well, what do you believe? Do you believe in tuning forks but not Tibetan singing bowls? So there's a choice. So as you define your way down the rabbit hole, eventually you get to a point where you're going to get resistance, where you're going to bump into a wall, where you're going to bump into, oh, that's nonsense. That's BS. I don't believe in tuning forks. Well, that's the point where you are supposed to pause 2, 3, or do a tactical pause and consider, why not? Why don't I believe in that? Because that's probably what you've been believing for your entire life, that can't happen. That doesn't mean anything. That has no bearing on the moment. That is nonsense. Why not open your mind just a little bit more and dig into that resistance, that sticking point, that tuning fork moment, and just think, maybe I should consider there's something to this. Maybe I just have to be a little more curious about this nonsense, and then really determine if it is nonsense for you. But it's always going to be nonsense if you never explore it. It's always going to be what you think it is, just by the simple thought. And therefore, it requires action. It requires pursuit. It requires the hunt of the knowledge. So what's right in front of your face of the tuning forks don't work, that's nonsense. There's adventure beyond that. there's at least a day's worth or 2 days worth or 2 years worth of adventuring just on tuning forks. In your mind, you can adventure on this subject. Never mind talk to other people about it. Never mind go halfway around the world to see if it's a thing. So there's lots of stuff out there that you can adventure into, be better for, as long as you move beyond the sticking point that's right in front of your nose of, that's nonsense. Use your binary choice in that moment to pursue rather than to stand still.
What do you got?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
I was go ahead.
Okay. I I love the fact that you used the term resistance, Shaun. And as you were talking, the thing that really kicked in my head was when we used to do all of our procedures for using command wires, anytime you're using electrical circuits, right? In order to set off explosives, you're determining whatever you're doing with electronics. Resistance is a key thing. It's something that you have to measure regularly. And you have to check to make sure that your wires are set to there's a certain resistance allowance that you can sit inside. Otherwise, that wire's no good. We got to do something else. And I was likening it to a thought process because it can be very linear, and if you extend that thought process out too far, you're going to meet a lot of resistance, right? If your wire is too long, you're going to have a lot of resistance. You're not going to get that return signal. Whereas if you shorten that wire setup, it'll work, but you lack range. So how do you develop in that moment to alleviate the resistance, but then also still maintain that depth of thought processes? And I think what you said was perfect in the fact that it's experimentation. Oh, well, I'll try this wire. Oh, what about that wire? And they're just different thought processes. They're different lanes, different roads to go down and go, I wonder if I can get down farther on that pathway versus this pathway. Let's try it. And I just love the fact that you used resistance because it clicked in my head. Seb, what were you going to say?
Yeah, now is probably the best time in the world to have these conversations because what we are seeing is an intersection between science and spirituality. A lot of those practices that for the longest time were siloed are now the scientific world, which is for some people this has no bearing. For some people, spirituality, as we define it, has no bearing. For me, I just so happen to be passionate about both of those realms, and this has always been the case. I love science, and I love when science is capable of explaining something that's considered within the spiritual realm, and vice versa. But now what we're seeing is intersectionality, and that is where the magic is, in my opinion, and that's exactly what we have. And so when Travis was talking about the frequency, so I'm not going to dive like too deep in the technical things related to this. This is more of a conversation that we have so that people can go out and look it up and try to find some answers and really get into exploration. But yesterday I was watching a documentary, and again, the name escapes me, but if you go on YouTube and do the research, you will be able to find it. But essentially what it spoke about, it was about 18 minutes long, and it spoke about frequency. And what it essentially says it as it pertains to manifestation. And so the tuning fork that Shaun was talking about earlier, you take one, if you don't believe in I believe it's correspondence or where you affect something and the other thing that's made of the same vibrations is affected. Do you remember the word, Shaun?
Maybe coherence.
Something like that. It's either correspondence or coherence or something. Maybe Chance, if you can look it up. But so what happens is some stars are made of the same vibration, and one of them explodes like a million light years away. The other one explodes at the exact same time. Boom. Right. And so we thought for the longest time that there was no correlation between that and human things, or things of the human nature. And so now what they're seeing is a tuning fork. If you hit it, it vibrates, and the thing that's in tune with the vibration starts vibrating the secondary tuning fork. So now you just did that from a distance. Call it telekinesis or whatever, not telekinesis, but call whatever you want to call it. I mean, if you want to put a fancy name on it, but essentially it works that way. So now the suggestion is made that when you are setting up an intent, when you are taking action, forward actions to materialize something that you really want, but you are putting all the pieces in the right spot. We already know from a neuroscientific standpoint that you're opening up your brain for receiving more information, that you're more open to the information that you are receiving, that you're seeing opportunities, and you're more sort of inclined to take them. But now what they're suggesting is that you've actually changed the vibration that you are emitting when you do all of those things, and those vibrations will connect with similar vibrations of the things that you are looking for. So you're going to be connecting through vibrations instead of I'm just going to take action and somehow miraculously things happen. And so that's why it's said, and in my life this has proven true more than not. Let's put it this way: when you are doing all of the work and nothing seems to work, but you keep on doing all of the work and you never quit doing all of the work and seeing yourself in the outcome that you are seeking and all of those things, what ends up happening is all of a sudden it unleashes a chain of event that everything happens easily. There is zero resistance. It's like, and it starts flowing. And I cannot begin to tell you how many times this happened in my life. But also, I never was one to quit early. I was always one to keep pushing and keep doing the things that I needed to do and not give into the negative energy associated with whatever it is, the difficulties associated with whatever endeavor I was engaged in. And so that makes a ton of sense. But now they're starting to look more and more at that. So not only the manifestation itself has neuroscientific sort of foundation, but there is vibrational foundation, all kinds of other things. And so you're lining up more than one system. This, we're talking about interconnectedness, and I think that's the big danger. Oh, this is a neuroscientific process. This is a psychological process. This is a medical process. What are we doing that for? Like, all of those things are completely intertwined. And so I'm not surprised that those two things are starting to intersect. A lot of the science and a lot of the things that we now know to be true were used by the Mayans and the Incas. The certain way they structure their buildings, the way the sound reverberated off the walls, the way if you've never ever been anywhere near Mayan ruins, you will know that they had the way they built sort of their structures so that you could be at both ends of the field and have a regular conversation that you could hear as if you were on a radio. Like, we are talking thousands of years ago, not 100 years ago. We're talking, and so they were already very familiar with this. If you look at the interpretation of the pyramids by Nikola Tesla, who's literally the forefather of frequency, of explaining frequencies, and what did Tesla know? Well, here's an interesting fact about Tesla. At the time that he was coming up with all those concepts, he was essentially completely shunned. And people don't know this now because 80% of his research has proven to be real, to be accurate. And so now we see him as a genius. But back in the day, he was a heretic. Like, he would have been burnt at the stake if he was, somewhere else in the world, probably. But and so now what we are seeing is 80% of his revelations are accurate, and that's at least. So we're still kind of learning about some of the other ones. Look at Einstein speaking about frequencies. If you get a chance to have a look at that, go see what Einstein was saying. It's completely in line with what Tesla was saying. And so there's a crazy world out there. And the more you use your brain as a parachute, so it works open, the more you're going to find that, you can navigate a landscape that isn't at all magic. It's science intersected with spirituality.
I think at the basis of that's because math is the universal language, right? And
yes,
especially
precisely.
when we start talking about frequency and so on and so forth, it is at the basis of math and physics.
Quantum
and so
math, and quantum physics.
Trav, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah. See if my lack of sleep brain can keep it all together here. But, we didn't invent math. They say we discovered math, right? All we do is we take a look at patterns and repeating patterns and see how they fit together. Some of it works, and we create a structure of physics, and, things fall terminal velocity 32 feet per second squared, 9.8 8 meters per second squared. That's a known fact. Hey, we can cross that one off based on gravitational pull and the amount of backwards pressure an object would have, like the Earth against whatever it's falling against. Like, you can start creating all of these formulas and rules, but they all go out the window when you start getting smaller and smaller and dealing with, let's say, quantum physics. In quantum physics, we talk about things like the tuning fork. One can tune over here, one can tune over there. Set one off, the other one vibrates. But we know why. We can measure that. We can see, we can visualize it. We can create experiments that are repeatable that let us understand anyways why this is happening. Quantum entanglement, we don't understand that yet. We know it to be a case based on our observations, but even our observations alone will change the outcome, like when we look at the double slit theory. So when Shaun talks about observing different things and observing these energies, it's a very real thing. I mean, you can just walk into a room where a fight's happened and realize, holy crow, feels heavy in here, right? You can feel it in your body when you might not be able to rationalize why that might be. Seb talks about, I just love how science is explaining how these things are working and all these things like the Mayans were working on a long time ago and how it's all coming into place. But again, we're relying on a science that's providing us with information that we say, okay, it's repeatable. We see this to be true. Based on what we know now, there is that one key in that all of that, and that's where faith and science kind of coincide. You know things to be a certain way. Well, do I? Can I explain that to somebody else? But if I know it for myself, and it affects myself and it affects those around me, do I have to explain it to other people? And I think that's what a lot of this really is. When I look at it, whether I believe in pressure points and acupressure, whether I believe, I mean, we've probably seen George Dillman and his thoughts on pressure points and dim mak and death touch and all the rest. And everyone can laugh at the McDojo stuff that's going on over there. I remember as a kid taking a seminar, like, what is this stuff? He had some reasons why it wouldn't work on me, but he said something about, because I think circularly, or my energy patterns flow in a circular fashion. That's why it's not working. But as an observer of my own life, as I move through it, I know I've said the quote before, but I know it to be true to myself. It's Viktor Frankl in the concentration camps and observing how some people can find meaning and joy and happiness in the most terrible environments where other people are beside themselves, and they really look at what it is that we're able to control. And he says, the last of life's great freedoms is one's ability to choose their own attitude in any given circumstance. And essentially, that choice of your attitude, whether I choose to explore, whether it's a binary choice, I go in this door, I go in that door, I choose to explore these different modalities, it opens myself up to creating a reality that just kind of clicks and kind of works. So whether I believe it or I don't believe it, I can look at the effects that it's having on me. Is it all placebo? Maybe, but it's working. Just because I can't explain it in the moment doesn't necessarily mean that it isn't something that's without merit. So that's the gist of what my couple hours of sleep brain can put together in the moment. But I don't know if, like, I believe the frequency thing. I know that we see on a frequency. I know that we hear on a frequency. I know that basically everything boils down to wavelengths. I don't buy into, you're a high frequency individual and you're a low frequency individual, because if you know about radios, you'll know that actually lower frequencies are the ones that we're using to talk to China with. They go a further distance. But whatever that is, the frequency or the vibe that we're on, I had one individual point out to me, he says, Trav, you live in Ladner. Yeah. Are there any drug dealers in Ladner? Probably, right? Any meth heads? I don't know, probably. I don't see them. He said, I'm willing to bet statistically there are, but you don't see them, do you? No. How about arsonists and thieves? No. He's like, because they run in very different circles than you do. They're operating on a different frequency than what you're on. So if we're able to elevate our frequency, whether that means high, low, whatever it is, but find ourselves on a mental thought process that aligns yourself with other people that are moving in a direction that we find desirable, like those on the collective, I think I can buy into that definition of frequency.
That's interesting. Shaun, you got any thoughts on this?
I do. So, I've hung out at the pyramids, went there for that purpose, was to figure some of this stuff out. Did a 4-day trek across the Andes to hit Machu Picchu and stand there and figure that out. All the other places that I've gone to and stood inside of or in front of or next to, that's like my own adventurous spirit kind of externalizing itself. But man, that's my internal spirit as well. And that's my internal aspect, trying to synchronize up with these locations, trying to absorb the vibe and take it with me into the future. And so what does that even mean? Like, I mean, you can't grab a cup full of Machu Picchu frequency, but you can stand in it and you can feel it and you can maybe absorb it and maybe hang on to it for a while or for the rest of your life, as I like to think of it. And so I think that it's one thing to watch a video and it's one thing to read about a thing, but inevitably, in order to properly understand it, I think you've got to stand in it or stand on it or be with it. And so that requires that external action of eventually you got to put the book down. All the wisdom that you've absorbed from the book, you've maxed out. That's it. If you read it twice, you're not going to gain a notable improvement from it. So eventually you got to put the book down and you got to put your shoes on and you've got to start heading towards the spot, whatever the spot is, so that you can absorb some of this frequency and understand what it means to you in the external world, in the practical world, in the physical world, in this three-dimensional reality that we all exist in, rather than the book reality, an almost two-dimensional representation of a scientific and spiritual confluence moment. Reading about it is sometimes more easily understood than standing in it and not reading anything. By standing in a moment that has some sort of frequency to it, if no one's explaining that to you, what's happening in that moment, the feeling that you're feeling, and if you're not explaining it to yourself, then you might just be feeling a little bit of dissonance. You might be feeling a little bit of, well, what's with this place? Why does it feel this way? And you may never think about it any further. I know that I'm looking at Trav right now and I'm considering the freaking boatload of swamps that I've walked through. And every once in a while, there's a swamp that has a feeling about it, sometimes it's like, oh, this isn't quite evil, but there's something about this swamp. And then other times I've gone through swamps and it's like, wow, what's going on here? It feels like something died in this swamp. Feels like there's some death hovering over this swamp. Then there's other times I've gone through swamps and it's not that it's spooky, but it's got a little bit of there's something going to happen. There's a premonition to the swamp. And so there's all of the swamps that I've walked through, that everyone here on the panel has walked through. It's either called a swamp 1,000 times or it's called 1,000 different swamps. And that's how I get to view it. That's the world for me. Is it might be called a swamp, but there's a whole pile of different versions based on how I feel as I'm about to step into it, how I feel when I'm in it, and how I feel once I've stepped out of it. And those are three very different processing states. And so I like to try to process each state. I'd like to consider it before I jump in, while I'm in it, and while I've jumped out of it. You could spend the rest of your life thinking about a single swamp in those three states if you really thought deeply. And so, back to looking at Travis and thinking, I wonder how many swamps Travis has walked through and felt this kind of divergence of, it's not just a swamp, it's more than a swamp. So I'm curious, Trav.
Lots. And I remember at a young age reading Gavin de Becker's book, The Gift of Fear. We've probably all read that one. It's It's a decent book. It's a really good sales piece. I think that's the biggest thing I took out of it. He's got some good information that then resells him over and over in his services throughout the book in a fantastic way if you're into business. But The Gift of Fear talks about, a person walks into a swamp, a person walks into a bar, they walk into an area and they're like, it doesn't feel right? They just can't, they get this gut feeling or this woman's intuition. And what Gavin tries to do is say, don't worry about rationalizing it. Men loves to rationalize things and find the science behind it. Now, why do I feel afraid in the moment? Why am I feeling that this swamp has got death lingering over it when maybe it was something that you smelled that you haven't picked up on in your mind that you've smelt before? Maybe it was something you saw or you heard out of the corner of your eye. Your brain's processing, but maybe your prefrontal cortex hasn't quite caught up and given you a very clear picture of it as to the why yet. I think it's important for people to follow the advice that Gavin puts out, which is trust your gut. You get that feeling, trust it. You have all the time in the world afterwards to walk out and analyze and think about why that might be. But in that moment, you have to just go with it. And sometimes it's going to be wrong, right? Like I had Jamie Flynn, he's a base jumper. I think he's actually been on the Collective as well, perhaps. On the Silvercore podcast, talking with him, and he says, I got the rule of threes. If my alarm doesn't go off, if I get cut off in traffic, if I'm just not feeling it, and sometimes I'll just base it on that just not feeling it, I'm not going to jump that day. And he had a pretty horrific accident that he almost didn't live from in Turkey when he didn't land well. And he says all the signs were there afterwards, but I ignored them. I think it's important for us when we're entering these swamps to be extra in tune, because with practice, it'll get easier and easier for us to recognize these different feelings. Being in the outdoors, I feel it all the time. I know if I'm in an area that's going to be game rich or not. A lot of times just by sense. Now, if I really thought about it, there's probably reasons for it, and I could probably articulate it, but after a while, you just move from location to location until you get to one that feels good.
Absolutely.
But, Shaun, and not to derail things too much, but Machu Picchu, and you felt this energy when you were in there, I kind of want to know what it felt like. Have you felt that before, and can you replicate it, or would you want to?
Yeah, I don't mind answering that question because it's a fascinating subject. And it's kind of one I almost launched into with Seb just a little while ago. And the question was kind of like, how was it at Miyamoto Musashi's waterfall? And we kind of briefly talked about it when Seb and I hooked up in Vancouver just as we'd returned back from our Asia visit. And so as I kind of laughingly explained, I didn't dive into it too deeply because we just didn't have the time. We were talking about book stuff. And so I just said, someone who has been on the Collective as a guest, Coach Whiskers, who's an awesome dude. He'd asked me the exact same question in the green room just before we went into the Collective podcast. And I said, man, he suggested The Highlander off of Highlander.
The
Quickening.
The Quickening. He'd suggested The Quickening from Highlander, where, you take somebody's head and you get all their power and, their power's coming in. You're just like, feeling all of the vibe. And so it was like at that waterfall, I was taking in all of that energy. And I felt like I had the ability to shoot it out, like to be able to take it in and then to use it. But what I didn't get to, and that's what I explained to Coach Whiskers, and that's kind of what I said to Seb, but what I didn't jump into was that it's almost like it felt to me like it was a localized energy, not like a universal energy. And what I mean by that is while I was there, I could feel it. But when I was on the bus, an hour later, it's not like I had waterfall energy that I could shoot out of my laser eyeballs. So it wasn't anything like that. It was just a moment that I was collecting an understanding of what is possible in that location and then taking it with me into forward knowledge. So I experienced it. I understand it. Now, how do I replicate it? I don't know. I don't know. But you'll never know anything unless you go out there and stand next to a waterfall and feel these things. And so I felt what I felt. I I did what I did, and now it's for me to figure the rest out in the present and the future. And so just like Machu Picchu as the example, standing there, like I mean, it's not like I sat in the middle of Machu Picchu cross-legged and tried to absorb all of the energy that was in that location. What I did was I walked around on top of Machu Picchu and observed and tried to feel. And it wasn't just a 30-second feel. It was like I spent several hours up there trying to feel what I wanted to feel or if there was anything to feel. And there's always something to feel for me. It's just I wasn't sure where it would take me, what I would learn from it. And so by keeping an open mind up in these locations like Machu Picchu or like in the pyramids or like wherever, I think it comes down to being open to the senses of the moment, being open to what the universe is going to kick out in your general direction as to maybe an understanding of the moment or an understanding of your future on, when you get to that future point, you can look back and think about these things. It Nothing on this subject of what it felt like will be understandable by a general audience unless they've stood in these moments and felt something, because otherwise it's just like it's crazy talk. It doesn't mean anything. There is no energy. You can't feel anything. What are you talking about, pal? You can't feel anything. Well, you can, but you got to go stand in these spots and feel it to understand that it's a thing. Then once you understand it's a thing, then it's for you to decide whether you want to feel that thing again. And I have lots because I pursued them because I understand that it is a thing. And so, it either is a thing or it isn't. And if it isn't a thing for you, then this is a hard topic to wrap your head around because you just haven't stood in the spot that's right for you. And so, what is right for you? Chances are it is probably going to have to be something notable, like that is guaranteed going to leave an impact in order for you to change your mind on this subject. And by impact, I mean that isn't just an energetic impact. It takes more than that when you're first timing this stuff, I believe, anyway. I think there has to be some other things that are wrapped around that synchronized moment, that frequency that you can feel. And it takes a little bit of, I'm going to use the word magnificence. So there's almost got to be a magnificent moment wrapped around the feeling moment. And by magnificent, I mean like it could be anything. So you're standing in front of the pyramids, you're looking at the flats, you're looking at these three huge structures, you're looking at a camel, you're feeling the heat on the back of your neck, and that is called not normal if you're living right next to the West Edmonton Mall. And so that moment where it's like, look at this magnificence. If you can dial into this as like, whoa, an alien moment for me, this is like a really, really different moment for me. That magnificent moment can then like snap you into the reality of, hang on a sec, I feel different about this place. And so now it doesn't have to be Machu Picchu, it doesn't have to be the pyramids, but it has to be something again that has some magnificence to it where you snap into the moment precisely so that you can possibly feel it. So your question, Trav, what I did envision was, you're climbing up something and you just get almost to the crest of a ridge, and just as you're about to crest, you get a feeling and you're not sure why. And as you not turkey neck up, but as you kind of come up over the ridge and start kind of eyeballing what's over the ridge, bam, it's a magnificent stag with a little bit of fog in the background. And so when you see that moment and connect with that moment, it's magnificent. I mean, the setting is magnificent. And sometimes it takes that like, bam, it takes that one thing to snap you into the present for you to understand the magnificence of the moment. And then hopefully you feel something. And it's a feeling that is beyond just like, wow, look at that view. Or wow, look at how many points on that stag. It's more than that. It's deeper than that. The magnificence of the moment manages to pull you into a feeling. And it's that feeling that you're supposed to pursue, not the view. It's the feeling that you pursue. And if you can pursue it in that moment, like right there in that split second, and just get a foot deeper into the feel of the moment, well, presto changeo. Now you don't have to stand next to Stonehenge, or you don't have to stand next to these spots that may have some form of energetic connection for you as an individual. So maybe that answers your question on what I felt in Machu Picchu. It's a hard one to articulate, but I think that no one has to go to Machu Picchu. What they have to do is maybe consider what could be magnificent for them in their near future, and it's all around us. No matter where you live, no matter what you do, no matter how much little or a lot of time that you have left in your life, it's right out your door. If you think about it a little carefully, you can step out your front door and within half an hour, you can be next to something that has some relative magnificence to your maybe regular life, we'll call it. Now, that scale of magnificence, of course, can go from 1 to 10. I mean, a half hour from your house in the forest that you've never visited before, that's kind of magnificent. But if you jump on a plane and go stand in front of the pyramids, frickin', it's going to open up your eyes for sure. So there are levels to the magnificence, no doubt about it. But no one has to go from 0 out of 10 to 10 out of 10 today if you've never played this game of go seek something that is frickin' rad and then stand in it and absorb the moment so you get the feeling that you're looking for, the feeling of the specialness of it, the feeling of connecting with something more than just the view.
This brings up a lot of really good things in my head, but I'm thinking about Transformers, and I don't know why you guys have my head stuck on electrical equipment for some reason, but this is where my head is going. And those points, those places, those are stores of potential energy. They're places that have their own unique, at least this is what I'm getting from you, that they have their own unique frequency, they have their own power, they have their own energy just kind of built up in that position. And when you can walk into it and tap into it, you can then absorb some of that potential energy and utilize it moving forward into your life. And there's been a few times in my life where I have been in positions to absorb those potential energies, and they are, for lack of a better word, cosmic, right? They are massive pools of energy that you can tap into if you know how to do it. And to your point, Shaun, if you've never explored the world of energy or or of any of this sort of thing, if you try to go to Machu Picchu, you could climb to the top and be like, wow, cool view, and walk right back down. And that would be the extent of your trip. Versus being able to stand in those moments and absorb all of that potential energy and then utilize it later on as your own personal kinetic energy moving forward. At least that's the way I'm seeing it. Seb, what are you thinking?
Like there's so much I could go on. I've been taking, like, I'm on 2 page of notes, so I'll just keep it, not brief necessarily, but at least to a few points. What Shaun is talking about is so important, and that's on the macro level. But imagine on the micro level, you can do that. That's a concept of gratitude, essentially. How feeling the moment right now. How does it vibe with me? That could be drinking water, fresh water, without having to walk 10 miles to go get it. That could be, having a roof over your head. It could be all of those things. So you can do this on the micro as well, and then you can go out and explore the world and do this as well. But let's put it this way, to make it a visual analogy. If you take somebody that's never worked out a day in their life and you bring them to the gym and you have them do a bicep curl, the last place they feel that is in their bicep. Somehow the movement is exactly the same. They haven't changed anything. They haven't done anything differently, but somehow they absolutely cannot feel that in their bicep. Why is that? Because they do not have the mind-body connection. Mind, body, physicality, environment, all of those things that have to come into play so that you can send the energy exactly where you want it in your peak of your bicep muscle or whatever the case may be. And so if a person is out there looking in and they're seeing somebody working out, there is no difference from the person that's doing bicep curl here and the person that's truly doing bicep curls that are beneficial for the growth. You can't tell visually, but there is a massive difference when it comes to game day. And so when you work with athletes, it's not so much about just demonstrating the proper way of proceeding with the movements, or the proper form that they should, and the proper velocity they should be applying the movements, but it's also about building that mind-body connection. And so the first impediment to this is mental blocks. And people do that all the time, as Shaun alluded to, by refusing to engage in something that's seemingly strange or that goes outside of their area of expertise, or something that they even heard about, or they, and so we're really quick to discount. And I'm not suggesting that there isn't a whole bunch of stuff that you should be discounting. What I am saying is there's no harm in taking a little bit of time to explore, because ultimately you're going to live that time anyway and wake up on the other end of it the exact same person you were. So you got two choices. You either disprove it, which changes nothing because time was going to flow anyway, or you find something that you can really assimilate, something that you can action upon, or that you can draw from. And so what I've been seeing recently is that when you're having conversations with people, let's take something that has a long tracking history of evidence-based concept. Water fasting, say for a 7-day water fast, which we know it's been documented over and over again. Every time somebody speaks about this, you start reading the comments, you'll see a million different comments that say that's just crazy. You guys should never put this on the internet. You're going to kill people. All of those things, of course, all of which is absolutely not the case. Nobody understands about autophagy and how it cleans the body and all of those other things because they won't take the time to do the research. And so if you have a closed mind, every single opportunity that you have to elevate your consciousness isn't going to happen. And when you do that, you are going to be exactly where you were 10 years ago in 10 years. There is no doubt that that's going to be the case. So the key isn't to take everything you hear at face value and assimilate it into your own life. That's not what this is all about. This is about you receiving some potential wisdom, having the wisdom of looking into it and start finding whether or not there's some relatability for you in there, and if that thing can do something for you. And now you can move on and go to the next thing. When Shaun speaks about, not having stood there, you know what it reminds me of? Good Will Hunting. When he is figuring out a way to come back at this little wisecrack that knows everything because he's read all the books and knows all of the academic stuff. And he says, I realize I'll never be as smart as you. I never will. That's just a fact. But you never stood in the Sistine Chapel. You've never smelled what it smelled like. You've never felt what it felt like. And this to me was one of the most powerful moments in movie history as far as I was concerned. Because how do you get back at somebody that's so superior intellectually? And it was very hard to do that. And he was witty as well. So which made it worse. But he was able to not only sort of break the walls, but he was able to establish a connection that none of the other therapists were able to do by flanking him and using something that's an actual truth, which is you have never been there. You have no idea. You've never felt it. And so I can really relate to this. When Shaun went to Japan and his entire trip, I felt in my very bones with every single write-ups, because I've put myself in situations so often to feel locations that I absolutely know it to be the case. Every single one of those spots has something very, very special to offer if you're open to it. And so when Shaun was, writing his post and explaining where he was and what he was doing, I was living that. I've never been there. Don't mistake this for now I know what it feels like, because I would have to go and do exactly what he did or something like that to truly understand the depth of it. But I can tell you this, I was able to relate to that trip probably more than most humans because I felt that. And so when I asked Shaun, how was it to be where Musashi stood? How did it feel like? I didn't need to explain that to him. He knew exactly what I was asking. And so I would say this. We're always talking about this, and we're always say, go out and explore and do all of those things. Those things are necessarily they're. I wouldn't say they're optional. They're really not optional. Like, you're looking for things to look forward to in life. Start exploring the varied concepts, and start opening your mind up to the possibility of, and once you've engaged in something actively for enough time to corroborate or deny the fact that it's working, then move on to the next thing. But by the end of it, you're going to have an entire baggage of different lenses to switch to see and view the world from, which is going to translate to everything else you do, whether it's problem solving or finding reasons to be around or gratefulness or whatever the case may be. We have incredible amount of capacity. And I think that some people walk around thinking that there's a limit to how much things we can know and feel and do. And there isn't. There's only self-imposed limit. Sometimes I love to make that analogy, but there are people out there oftentimes that don't want to learn or don't want to go to school or don't want to, because I only have so much room in there. There's people that will recite an entire phone book number by number, and they haven't scratched the surface. So don't you think that you're running out of space? Like, you got so much space for that exploration.
That's a really interesting point, in the fact that you're the amount of information has little to do with it, right? In the fact that you can memorize a phone book. How is that helping you? Right? Like, what information are you storing in your brain at that point in time? What types of energy are you using in your own daily life that you are storing on a regular basis? And how much of that is actually assisting you moving forward? How much are you able to apply somewhere else, right? Can you just randomly be like, A. Aronson, excellent, I'm going to phone that guy right now, right? Like, how often are you doing that? Not often. So I think it's really important that what you said there is the fact that it is an understanding of what is not only useful, but the exploration of what could be useful in the future. Trav, you got any thoughts?
Yeah. Before we started this discussion here, you'd given us a topic. You said carpe diem, and we all said, let's throw the topics out the window. We're doing 2024 differently. Let's have a discussion. Let's dive deeper. But a lot of the things that we're talking about here all comes back to that topic, if you really think about it. I don't know if we are preconditioned into talking on this path or not, but, seize the day. That was from Horace's poem there, Carpe Diem, Quantum Minimum, Credula Postero, like, pluck the day, minimize tomorrow as if it can never come. Shaun's talked about past, present, and future a number of times. Seb, a few times now. Time's going to flow anyways, I think is what you said. If we think about what we're trying to do here as with the collective, how we're trying to grow ourselves and impact onto others, and how that works, a lot of the truisms that you've talked about here apply. You can climb to the top of Machu Picchu, chance you say, and say, hey, nice view, that's it for me. Really, the biggest thing that I'm taking away from all of this is how we choose to let what we're listening to, what we're watching, what we're experiencing impact us. And then what we're going to do with that. Is it impacting us in a positive way? Is it impacting us in a negative way? And both are important. I mean, we need to have that balance so we can understand and appreciate one over the other. But when we come back to that whole carpe diem in the individual day, past, present, and future, one thing that I find quite often people are looking for is, what's that quick fix? In the same way that I'm saying, like, what can I do about this sleep? I need more sleep, damn it. Is it acupuncture? Is it 432 hertz? Is it... And the answer to all of this is yes. It's yes. It's all of those things. And I have to be open to it. And it's not that it's going to be a completely different future or how it's going to make me reinterpret the past. It's that we're sort of in this ever extending present at all times. And if we can realize that in the whole seize a day, if I wanted to forget about tomorrow, pluck the day, minimize what tomorrow could be, that could have some pretty dire consequences if I live my day on the day-to-day of pleasure seeking and going all out on just singular days. But if I realize that I'm living my life in the ever present, every little advancement that I make, whether that's stepping out my door and enjoying the outdoors on one of Seb's mental health walks that happens every 2 weeks out here in the lower mainland on the Sundays, or if I'm going off to grand waterfalls on the other side of the world and I'm experiencing that, every little bit that I take in is going to be an important piece of what makes me, and whether that's good or bad. And I can measure that bad against that's not what I want to be, or that gives me a litmus of where I need to be. I think that's sort of the takeaway that I'm hearing from everybody in this discussion. You don't need to go pedal to the metal. You can experience these things sort of as micro adventures, but we got to be open to the experience.
It's been mind-boggling listening to you guys talk, because a lot of it has brought back this concept of how electronics work, how electrical processes work, how certain things that we've invented physically there's actual representations of them throughout life in other realms, like Machu Picchu, like Stonehenge, like the like the pyramids. One of them for myself was standing at the base of a mountain and being able to like track the entire path all the way up to the top, and just standing in the magnificence of that moment. But in those moments, in those positions where you get to kind of understand where you are in the world a little bit, I'm not sure why my mind keeps going back to the electrical processes. But Trav, you got an idea? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think it's because we are electrical creatures, essentially, and it's a language that we can use to be able to easily quantify why things are happening. If a capacitor holds energy and then discharges that energy, and we feel like we've held energy and we've discharged energy, we can say, I feel like a capacitor, right? If I'm feeling a lot of resistance, it's easy for me to say, hey, this is like, how a resistor works. It's easy to talk on frequencies and wavelengths and be able to kind of understand that. It's harder to quantify the feeling. It's harder to be able to say this felt like what? It's like trying to describe a color that doesn't exist yet. And I think that's probably why it goes back to that. If you want to really kind of go out there a little bit, I'm sure you've heard about the simulation theory, whether we live in a simulation or we're not in a simulation. And some people say that smart scientists would say that our odds of living in a simulation far outweigh our odds that we don't. And others would say, no. At best, it's 50-50, right? Which is, we're at the epoch, we are the ones generating the AI, and then it'll be something that happens in the future as if it's an inevitability. But that's just based on our understanding and how we can kind of process these things in the moment. And I think that all kind of goes back to basic mathematical processes, which is a language that we talk about, which we apply towards electronics. And I think that's why your head's going there, plus the fact that you've got an electronics background.
Yeah, it's pretty handy. The funny thing is I also, growing up, Shaun knows this. My mom's like a hippie, like a straight up hippie. She used to hitchhike across the United States back in 68, 69, and she introduced me to Reiki energy work when I was young, and I took to it really, really fast, and I apparently got pretty good at it. And then when I left the house and I joined the military and I went off to do my own life, it almost turned off completely. And it wasn't until just recently where I've actively started to re-engage in it, re-engage in the feelings of these things, because I turned off my feelings for so long based off of post-traumatic stress and dealing with all that and all my own difficulties coinciding with it. I had tried to shut all my feelings down rather than turn them all on. And over the years of healing, I now understand that as I turn them all back on, as I re-engage in all of those feelings and re-engage into what it is to manipulate energy, it's allowed me to get those feelings back again. It's allowed me to engage those senses that I didn't have before, or not, I haven't used in many, many years. So that it's an interesting conversation that we're getting into in terms of energy and usages and all these things that it's all coalescing into my own brain in one shot as we're talking about it. So I'm getting all of these ideas, and I have lots of notes just like you guys. So it's been a fascinating conversation so far. Shaun, you got any, or what do you got, Trav? You're going to say something?
Oh.
I saw you.
No. Only thing I'd say is why. Why'd you shut them off?
And shut them off.
And why are you feeling the way you do as you're turning them on? That's it. Just dig it a little deeper.
Those are interesting questions. So I shut them off because I remember explaining it, trying to explain what Reiki energy work was to a couple of people in basic training, and I think I just got made fun of so much that I was like, okay, I'm just not going to talk about this anymore. And because I didn't talk about it, I stopped using it, and because I stopped using it, I just tuned out from it. Whereas tuning back into it now has allowed me to, being able to access certain points in my own body again over years of healing and just re-engagement of myself has allowed me to re-see those pathways. At least that's where that's my thoughts on it. Shaun, what are you thinking?
Well, I am Reiki level 1 qualified, so if you need any Reiki work, you can just sign up at my Reiki program. So I have explored it, and I'm qualified in it. I think that something that I want to throw across is based on what you'd said, Chance, with, you did it back in the day, and now it's kind of bubbling up in you inside again, maybe. It's what we believe and it's what we don't believe that sort of determines our world. And so I'm going to throw something out there. A lot of people won't believe it, but that's okay. Maybe the idea in and of itself will be so challenging that it might help someone move their needle just a touch. But again, it's going to be a challenging proposition, so buckle in and hang on. So the idea being that Seb said he had felt some of the trip in Japan, or felt some of these moments, these we'll call them impactful moments that I might have written about, that he'd felt it. He's not the only one who felt it. I have had quite a few people who've said that they felt something in some of my trip at various points based on whatever imagery or whatever video or whatever verbiage that I was putting out. Well, not every single day that I was on that trip, just because there was so much stuff going on. I was busy with a lot of things, and sometimes I just didn't have the energy to do what I'm going to explain. But at some points in the trip, what I would do is sit down and wait for it. I would pour myself into a post. I would pour my energy into a post. I would take the time, our most precious resource, to spend the right amount of time to pour my energy into it. And so effectively, here's the weird part. Effectively, what I was trying to do was make a connection, an energetic connection with our three-dimensional world through a digital medium. So I was trying to overlay energy into energy. I was trying to overlay my life energy into a digital medium, into a digital energy. So anyone who would watch a video and read some verbiage and feel the moment, what they were feeling was a digital moment with a energy overlaid on top of it, me pouring myself into writing that thing, me pouring myself into taking that photo and saying whatever I would say about it. So it wasn't just a momentary instance of me taking a unthought of photo and rapidly scrabbling something down in verbiage and just hitting send. That's not what I was doing over there. And sometimes I was really dialing up my effort. So I was pouring some love into the post. And there's a wild difference for me between what I've just suggested as what I was doing versus what absolutely doesn't work for me. What absolutely feels dead to me is when someone else will take a random video. It doesn't matter. Someone jumping out of a perfectly good airplane, someone on a snowboard, someone throwing a javelin, someone with an archery bow and arrow. It doesn't matter what it is. They will pick a random video that has no bearing on their life. They've never picked up a bow and arrow. They will take that video and then they will incorporate some other quote on it that somehow is supposed to be impactful to their followers or impactful out to the social media world or impactful to everyone who knows them. They've never done the thing that they're talking about, and they barely understand the quote that they're putting together with the video. And when those two things occur, what I feel is it's a deadness to it. There is no life to it. There is no energy to that moment. I don't connect to it. It feels like a flatline signal to me, like it's dead. It has no relevance. And yet there's content out there that can be just 3 words with a single photo. And if it's done right, if it feels right, it makes an impact on me. And so what I've found by observing the social media space for the last couple of years, where I've really tried to target lock and understand this phenomenon called social media, what I've done for myself is I've established that there's a lot of stuff out there that doesn't work for me. And the stuff that does not work for me is the contrived, artificial, the fake-eroni stuff that has nothing to do with that person's life. They've never picked up an arrow, but they're using a bow and arrow. They're using a archery video to make their point. And yet they couldn't spell archery. And so it's that deadness to certain things out there that I feel on social media versus things that feel alive, things that I connect with, synchronize with, vibe with. And the stuff that I vibe with, like I'll use some of Seb's writing as an example. Some of the stuff that Seb writes, I feel. And it's probably because he's poured himself into it. Whether he took 3 minutes to write it or 3 days to write it is unimportant to me right now as I explain this. What is important is whether I feel it or not. And if I feel it, it's probably because the person who's delivered it has lived it, understands it well enough that they can pour themselves into 3 words and it will impact me. And so I find the idea of interconnectedness on social media spaces is easily delineated for me in this simple way. That's fake or that's real. Now I can granularly dig down into that and get down to level 1004 and say, well, here's why I feel that, and here's why I feel that, fake and not fake. I understand all the reasons that it is real or not to me. But at the end of the day, unless I'm really thinking about all the levels of why I don't connect with it, it's really simple at the top layer. It's because it's not that person. That person and what they're putting out is not real. That person is not representing themselves as the person that they are. If they do represent themselves as the person that they are, I feel it. I feel that it's real. I feel that it makes sense, and I feel that it impacts me for good. Where things don't impact me for good is when they are dead messages, contrived artificial messages, a carrier signal that doesn't feel authentic to me. If it's 3 words or 3,000 words done well, with some love poured into it, with some authenticity poured into it, I'm a big fan. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. Seb, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, for me, this has been the base premise of my social media account. Essentially, I when I created my social media, which was in 2017. So I started. Yeah, I didn't have an Instagram before that. When I was on the team, all the guys had Instagram, and they made fun of me for not having it. But I was busy working. I was busy building what it is that I was able to post about starting in 2017, and I had no interest in doing anything but engage wholeheartedly in the process long before I decided that I was wanting to use some of the tools I developed over the years to help others and create some content that was meaningful. So for me, if you look at my social over the last couple months, there's been sort of a lull in my postings. And the reason why that's the case is because I have nothing meaningful and impactful to say right now on that forum. I do have stuff to say, but it's not flowing. It's not vibing. I'm not vibing with it. It's not. I'm just not there. I don't have the right photo to associate with the right write up. There's a bunch of stuff. So I've been instead of trying to post because I have to post as I normally did every 5 days. I said to myself, you know what? And in fact, I noticed a sort of a bit of a decrease in my engagement, and part of that reason might have been that it became so autonomous that I was posting every 5 days, and that I was associating a cool photo with a write up and all of those things. But it kind of lost a little bit of that integrity piece and a little bit of that authenticity, right? And so what I decided to do was I'm going to wait until I have something to say. I'm going to wait until I have something meaningful to bring to the conversation and I have the right picture or the right moment captured or whatever the case may be. So I feel that wholeheartedly. And I feel that right now some people have a really, really hard time deciphering what's real and what isn't. And I don't blame them because we're essentially, overwhelmed with information coming from all different directions. And so and there's a lot of posturing. So if there's a lot of posturing, sometimes it's difficult to know if the words or if the content is grounded in reality of that person. And so I buy into this wholeheartedly. When I write and I have something to say, I would sit here forever. So I know exactly what Shaun is talking about when he speaks about making a meaningful post. And sometimes, you don't know when this happens. Sometimes I can be at the restaurant when this happens, and all of a sudden I have this thought that goes through my mind, and I'm now prepared to push something out that I believe will be truly meaningful. And so now I have the conversations with, the spouse and everybody to say, look, like when I have moments of inspiration, it can happen at unforeseen times. So I try not to excessively engage in that in my social media when we're doing things together. But there may come a time where I'm sitting there and I'm cooking with oil, right? And I'm just like launching into something. And when I push the send button, I know that it will have the desired impact and the desired effect on the collective, and truly bring something that generally seeks one purpose, which is increasing connection between us.
I have a question on that. Do you find that it is a almost like a build up and then a release kind of deal where like you have this like all of this information all of a sudden kind of coalesces in your head and you're like, oh yes, okay, now I need like now I there's a just like I need to get it out to the world. I feel like this needs to be brought forward, and then once it's posted it's like, okay, and you kind of energy levels come down, or is it something different?
Yeah, for me, it's quite interesting because uh, I spend a great deal of time in my head going around and playing around and swirling around principles and things, and challenging all my own beliefs and others, and just trying to really shake the tree all the time. And what generally happens is I will come up with a thought process that shines a light on something that I've been maybe considering, or something that I've been thinking, or something that I've been talking about for many years, that brings a completely different angle to it, or some reinforcing principles. And sometimes I think that even for myself, as somebody that's been on all those podcasts, that done guest speaking appearances and all of those things, I feel that sometimes I can get in a box with my own thoughts in certain respect, and that's why I keep on challenging them and challenging myself to develop a different way to think about things and to look at it from different angles, all of this stuff. And I spoke to this extensively before, but I don't think that people would quite understand how much of that I do. And it's essentially, I don't waste time doing certain things. If I'm watching something that's inconsequential on Netflix, you can rest assured that 90% of that time was spent introspecting. Like, I do not shut my brain off for frivolous things because I don't have that kind of time. I don't have that luxury. And so if I want to engage in something because it's the sort of synchronicity of the moment with, say, my better half, and we're watching Yellowstone, then I'm fully engaged. But if I'm just there spending my time, and because I just so happen to be in bed or whatever the case may be, I will be doing something constructive, and that constructive thing is generally going to be spending a lot of time in my head and questioning all of the things, if for and so generally I will have an epiphany when my posts are coming out that I have poured my heart into. It will be an epiphany, and it may not be an epiphany that brings a completely different concept or a completely different angle to something I already knew, but a better way to articulate it, or a better way to get other people to connect with it, a different way to present it. All of those things. That's generally what happens for me.
I like that. Shaun, what do you feel on this?
Well, I think that I think what we're talking about, generally speaking and loosely speaking, is that creative spark within us, or our sense of creativity, or our sense of thoughtfulness, or our sense of contemplation or reflection, or our sense of curiosity, our sense of thought. And so I think that for myself, I'm constantly curious and creative, I suppose. And if I said everything that went through my head in respect to, oh, that's a new idea, oh, that's a new wisdom, oh, that's a new thing, I'd be talking a lot, and I'd be writing a lot, and I'd probably pick up a paintbrush and try to represent it with a paintbrush as well. I would be constantly putting out content. And I suppose therein lies the rub. Like, if you then make it your job to be a content creator, now you're holding yourself accountable to, well, at any cost, I've got to put out content. But the cost is yourself. And what do I mean by that? The cost is that if you're now titled as you've got to put out content, well, you're going to obligate yourself to do that, which means that your obligation is going to strip away the authentic moment of just, I don't feel like putting anything out today. I don't have a whole pile of ideas today. So then you've got to contrive ideas. Now you've got to artificially put out content, which doesn't really work for my head. But I don't find that day after day after day, I have absences or blank moments in my days where I don't have thoughts, or I don't have novel ideas, or I don't have stuff that I want to put out. I regularly, every day, have thoughts that I want to share. The only reason that I don't share them is because I feel like, well, who would listen? Who would pay attention to any of this? And it's not that I want people to see me. What I want people to do is see it, see the stuff that I'm putting out, and then incorporate that into their lives in whatever fashion. Even if they don't believe some of the things that I think, the very fact that they would take on the challenge of considering, is that real or is that not real? And so, back to the belief aspect, I don't believe that I've got the position or the authority or the platform to be able to just casually throw out all of the stuff that goes on in my head. I just don't believe that I have that platform, and so I don't want it, and that's why it doesn't happen. But if I really bit down on my mouthpiece and started putting out some of the thoughts that I have in respect to this entire conversation, that I could, honestly, I'm sure we all could talk about for another 12 billion years. I think that I hold back on a lot of my stuff because I don't want to put it out there and lead people down the wrong path that would then have them discouraged by some of my ideas. So we're talking about frequency. If I spent the rest of my life talking about my thoughts on frequency, it might put some people off. And I don't want to be responsible for that. What I do want to do is just put out a tiny little bit of information that might have a curious mind engage in looking down into the rabbit hole and wondering, I wonder how deep this goes. And so I'm comfortable with how far we've dug into frequency on this conversation already, but I don't want to dig into it too more because I don't want to put anyone off on what I'm already thinking about would put people off. Because if I relayed what I've seen or observed that is a bit woo woo, I don't want to put anyone off. I don't want to spoil their journey. I don't want to spoil their exciting adventure that they can step into in the near future by saying the wrong thing that would make someone shake their head and say, oh, no, that's BS. There's no way that can happen. And so I'm really careful with my content, I think, in respect to what I do believe to be out there in the world versus what a lot of people don't believe is out there in the world. So those two things for me are challenging balances on the regular.
I really like that. That's a really great clarification too. And to your point in that, going back to something that we were talking about earlier, is that resistance, right? We don't want to start engaging things beyond most people's resistance factor, right? If most people only have a resistance factor of say like 10 or 15 feet in depth, and we're talking about things that are 50 or 60 feet down in depth, there's that wall gets hit and they're like, nope, that's just way too far gone. But if you're talking things that are like 15 or 16 feet, just that little bit past where their resistance normally would lie, that gives them a bit more of an opportunity to push their boundaries a little bit. But if it's too far, then it's not even up for discussion at that point, I think.
Well, the trick is that if we're talking digitally right now and putting it out to an unknown party in the very near future, what I will say or how I will deliver is entirely different than if I'm doing it with a person who's standing in front of me, because now I'm connected with them. Whereas it's hard to connect with a nameless, faceless person in the near future who will listen to this. I can't connect with them with some synchronicity, but I can do that with a person. Like I can do it with the panel because I can see them. I can, to some degree, feel what's going on with the panel, with myself. But for someone who listen to this in the future, it's hard to connect to that because I can't feel it right now, but I can feel this moment. And so I can also feel a moment where it's a three-dimensional person standing in front of me. And that is a much easier thing to do, where you're talking about the resistance is 15 feet versus 16 feet. Well, I'll find a way to make it 15 and a half feet in that moment, boutiquely, customized based on the vibe in that moment with a three-dimensional person, which is hard to do on the social media.
100%. Travis, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, talk about social media, what is real, and there's a deadness to certain things. And I 100% agree. There's a lot of garbage out there, and there's a lot of things that just don't have any feeling or impact, I think was the word that Shaun used. Does it impact me? Mind you, that's the group that we're talking to. It's like an artist. There's a reason why the Mona Lisa affects so many people, and they travel all over the world, from all over the world, to go see it because the artist put their heart and soul into a picture. They made a painting, and it's got a residual effect on those who look at it. The same as music. People can compose a fantastic piece, and that's going to be moving for generations to come without them having to be in the same room together. But if it's a Chopin or Rachmaninoff or something that appeals to somebody who likes that kind of music, it might not appeal to somebody who's into rap or trip hop. There's going to be different audiences for all of that. So when somebody throws up a platitude on social media behind a black and white picture of, I don't know, some landscape or some colorful sunset, maybe that's going to impact some people. But it's not going to impact you or I, because we're, I guess, going back to where we were talking before about frequencies, we're operating on a different frequency. And Shaun, when I read your posts, and same with you, Seb, when I read your posts, I feel a deep connection through that. but I wonder if part of that is because I read it with your voice and I know a bit about who you are, and I can understand the amount of effort that went into those posts. And I wonder if other people just cruising by see this thing and cruise on. And maybe if I were to look at this in a way that might be relatable to people, because I have some thoughts or suppositions. Seb, when you get that inspiration and your heart and soul goes into making a post and you put it out there, do you feel an obligation to respond to those who are responding to it? And in the same breath, if nobody reacts to this thing, are you clicking back like, what's going on? How come what do you feel in that moment?
The answer is yes and no. I feel that expecting a certain response on a post, regardless of my cognitive knowledge that my engagement went down on account of the numbers on the screen, I don't put too much weight into the reasons why, because that's something that I know nothing about. And really, what was my intent and what am I seeking external validation for? Like, I'm not worried about that at all. In fact, and that's maybe to a fault at times. But I will say this. I would much prefer having, when I post something that's truly meaningful, that's truly impactful, I would much rather shut off the comments. That's my first incline. I would prefer to shut off the comments. Not because I don't want to hear from all the wonderful people and the followers that have been following me for years, which is my primary target audience to begin with, right? Like as you alluded to, the person the person that's been following, all of this good stuff. If you want to know anything about me, go read my post before, because I'm actually being me. So, and you'll find very quickly that that's the case. And so I'm not worried about the person that comes in that is a TikTok person that needs 18 seconds to have their attention grabbed. They're just not operating at the level at which they're a target audience for me. I just don't care. One day in their life, sooner or later, they will come to that point and they may revisit it, or they may find somebody like it, or they might find somebody they relate better to. Great. That's good. But not once have I posted something and went back and anxiously awaited the wave of comments. Quite to the contrary, especially for my latest post, for example, the one that discusses the situation with my leg, that and all of this stuff, medical things and what have you. On that post, I did not want that post to sound like a pity post, because it wasn't a pity party at all. It was a process that I try to capture to help people that are inherently going to go through adversity. And it's me being honest about how it hit me and how I retaliated and re-engaged. That's all it was. I don't need to be told how great I am. I don't need to be told how an inspiration I am. I don't need any of this. I much prefer not having any of this. But also, I have to realize that if it elicits a reaction in people, they're allowed to tell me how it made them feel. And I can just shut everybody down and just because I don't like it. And to be clear, it's not that I don't like what they are saying. I like what they are saying. I just don't like receiving that kind of praise on a post, for example. But it's never something that I look for, and I do engage with them. Generally, I will try to comment back or to say thank you or whatever the case may be, because I also don't take that for granted. What is it that I'm trying to do here? I can't be disingenuous. I have 10,000 followers. If they all stop following me now, it's going to affect me. Like, I don't care what I say, right? And it's not about the external validation piece. It's going to be like, what the hell happened, right? And trying to figure out what I could do better to prevent what it is that I made happen, so to speak. But I think it's important to have that sort of that spectrum, that the spectrum of acceptability where you're operating in, right? I've posted the post out. It's a post that speaks about something that was very dear to my heart, which was my condition and the mental processes associated with it. Instead of people just looking at me going, oh, he's just Seb, he can do whatever. It's like, no, that's not how this works. I had to work through all of those things just like anybody else. But those are some of the ways that I did that. So if I can help you even ever so slightly in your own life, my mission here is done. If that means one person, my mission here is done. If that means 10,000, then even better. But there is no weight put into sort of the the reciprocal nature of it, if I can call it that, or for somebody to let me know necessarily what it did for them. I don't need that kind of attaboys. I don't need that kind of pat on the back. I don't need to know.
Mm.
I can feel that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, it does.
100%. You got any more, Trav? Any other thoughts?
Not on that. No.
Okay. Shaun, you got anything to bring up?
Yeah, on the comments aspect, I mean, I never used to reply to comments. I didn't know you're supposed to. And I don't know now I'm looking back and I'm wondering, should I have? I don't know. But I did start replying back to comments, and what I found over a period of time and what I know now today, maybe I'll change my mind in the future, is I kind of enjoy replying back to comments and I try to make a consistent effort of even if it's someone saying thanks for what you do, Shaun, which makes me super freaking uncomfortable. I reply back with something along the lines of thank you, pal. So it's not that I'm trying to acknowledge them. What I am trying to do is make myself not available but approachable. And so there was a time when I was in social media where people didn't think I was that approachable because I'd put out what I'd put out and I wouldn't reply to anyone. They'd be hitting me with all the comments and I'd just totally ignore them and carry on with my day. That's not making me very approachable, or at least on the surface level, it would appear that I'm not an approachable guy. But I'm an approachable guy as long as you do it the right way. I'm approachable, but I wasn't doing social media well, so it looked like I wasn't approachable. Well, now, because I'm trying to make myself more approachable for others to hit me up on the regular, it's now a thing. People hit me up on the regular. And funnily enough, I'd said that just towards the end of the year and last couple of days of the year, I'd said in my live IG chats that, you know what, I think 2024 should be the year of the collab. 2024, not the year of the tiger, it's the year of the collab. And so I think that's generally, I don't make New Year's Eve resolutions, or I don't actually believe in them, but I do believe in general themes. A general goal, a general event sometime in my future that I like to kind of throw in front of myself and think, right, this year's a collab year, whatever that means. And I don't even know what it means yet, but I'll figure it out over the next few weeks. And by the end of this year, by the end of 2024, I'll have freaking cracked collabing out of the park, whatever that means. I don't know yet, but I'll freaking figure it out. So a general theme for me 2024 is it's time to start working, playing, hanging out with more people who are trying to do things well, who are trying to do social media well. And that'll have me talking with people that I wouldn't have considered talking with last year. And that's because in 2023, I was still trying to get my feet underneath me. I was still trying to figure out how to do social media properly. I was still trying to figure out the microphone. I was still trying to figure out how to communicate well. And so now that I got my feet underneath me, I'm happy to collab with anyone, maybe even people I don't like. Because if I don't like them, there's a chance that I've got something to learn in that moment where by the end of it, I'll be liking them. But that's for me to figure out as the challenge. And so I don't care who I collab with this year as long as they're not like a total goof. It's got to be someone who has some semblance of coolness within them. Maybe not as much cool as I would like, but they probably got more cool in them than me. And so these are the things that I want to learn in 2024 is how to collab more. And so now that that's out of the way, I want to jump into the Mona Lisa thing because like last summer, I was standing in the Louvre with my family with the Mona Lisa right there. And it's not that we went to the Louvre to see the Mona Lisa. We went to the Louvre to see the Louvre and all of the magnificent art in it. And some of the photos that I took and some of the things that I said from the Louvre were pretty good, were pretty impactful. But I do remember chirping about the Mona Lisa. And here was my experience with it. Like, you could see it on almost the horizon through the crowds, the masses that I was on the perimeter of, thinking there's no way I'm going to wade through that crowd to just get another inch closer to the Mona Lisa. Because that's not why I'm here. I'm not here to like be irritated with a massive, noisy crowd so that I can just get a little closer to a thing that isn't going to improve the moment for me. I don't need to reach out and barely touch the Mona Lisa to have seen it. I just needed to be in the space near it to see what I felt. Because I've seen it 1,000 times on 1,000 posters or 1,000 movies or 1,000 books or 1,000 whatevers. I've seen it lots. I didn't need to touch it to make it real. I just needed to be near it to feel the vibe on it. And so if I would have forged my way up closer through that crowd, the vibe would have been wrong for me. I could feel my irritation as I considered moving closer into that crowd. And why would I ruin the Mona Lisa vibe by adding irritation into my life, consciously choosing to do that just to get a half an inch closer to something that I've seen so many times, and I was just there for the vibe of it. So I think, talking about collab in 2024 and combining it with the Mona Lisa, this year for me is going to be about not having to reach out and touch all of the paintings that are out there, but standing where I am right now and projecting out into the social media space and feeling all of the Mona Lisas that are already out there that I want to talk to or hang out with, and not worrying too much about what the crowd is doing or not.
I'm going to postulate something here, and I just want to see if you guys are tracking me on this. And I think it's a case of resonance. And I think that's what we were talking about earlier. Seb, you asked me to look it up as to how tuning forks will work off each other, and it's resonance. So there's, as we all know, the frequencies and all that stuff. I'm not going to get into it, but the moment for you, Shaun, standing in front of the Mona Lisa, in front of behind the crowd and the tape and the 16 feet or whatever it is until the wall, and you're looking at this little picture about this big. To resonate in that moment, to have it resonate with you, you're able to tune into that resonance a lot better than most people can. Whereas the average person that walks into the Louvre that wants to go see the Mona Lisa, it's a checkbox. It has nothing to do with resonance, right? It's, I've seen the Mona Lisa. I was there. I'm going to go take a picture from the felt barrier and see if I can get a little bit closer, right? It's more of a, it's more of an accomplishment than it is the feeling of the moment, to resonate in that moment. And similar with the collabs. What you're seeking is a resonance, is a, how can I get this, what the collective is and what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to create, how do I get others to resonate with it? Well, the easiest way is when you have a tuning fork and you have another tuning fork out there and you ding and you're too far away, that resonance isn't going to take effect. So you have to get closer to it. And you got to get closer to it until you can hit that resonance field and create more energy based on that. And so I think this is what I think, this whole chat has kind of been about, is this resonance field that we all have, that we're all trying to tap into, that we're all trying to engage with, and how to get others on the same wavelength, how to get others into this resonance. What do you guys think? Am I on base or am I off base? Trav, I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
I'd say you're on base. I mean, the people who are listening to this are going to be people who are resonating on the frequency already. They're going to be, as they say, in the echo chamber or preaching to the choir. I think part of the idea of the collective is to attract like-minded people who want to be awesome, who want to work on the daily to be better, and realize that can be big steps, those can be little steps, but they're always recalibrating and moving into a direction that's going to be desirable. There are things that are going to come out of this podcast here, like, for example, the collab thing. I know right now, I can say with 100% certainty that there are going to be some collabs that come out of just Shaun putting that out there into the universe. And there's one in particular that I can think of with a massively cool individual who's got a really cool business, who I think is going to be 100% down for doing a collab, which I'm going to be doing an introduction to immediately following this podcast here. Yeah, I would say that there is a certain level of resonance. And I think that with the new direction that the collective is looking to move into 2024 and beyond, I think there needs to be a certain level of social license with those who are part of the collective. And those to be part of the collective, in my opinion, doesn't necessarily mean they have to speak on the collective. They can follow the collective, or they can just listen and apply what they're hearing to their own morals, to their own daily life, to go out there and help promote what the collective is trying to do. Because as we resonate with others, there's going to be some that are maybe we have more than one tuning fork. Shaun already identified he's got a Mona Lisa tuning fork and a crowd tuning fork, which I can relate to very, very closely. I don't want my crowd tuning fork going off. And I specifically spent a lot of time in the outdoors because of that. But with these multiple forks that are resonating on different frequency, there's going to be those who are listening to this now that have some that are slightly off frequency to what we're talking about, but they'll resonate with other people. They'll be able to take what we're talking about and propel it that much further. Just like Isaac Newton said, the reason I can see as far as I can is because I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. Not that we're giants, but I think all together, with everybody moving in the same direction, we can create essentially a resonant frequency that will be able to see further.
Yeah. Just to say, I think you and I are giants compared to these two here, but that's a side. That's a side.
How tall are you?
I'm 6'5.5".
There you go. We're about the
6'6" on a
same
good
height.
day, so yeah. Seb, you got any thoughts on this?
First time I went recorded a podcast with Travis and he opened the door, I was like, and he's not small, dude. Yeah, anyways, it was pretty shocking. I was like, well, we're stuck in here together. If I have to fight him off, maybe I should bring a friend. But yeah, no, it went well, and we developed a friendship. I'm very grateful for. But one of the things I wanted to kind of talk about is the need for proximity. This is one of my pet peeve. It's almost like if you look at kids, and kids will do that implicitly, adults will do it too. I must physically touch the thing if it's interesting to me. Like if it's a butterfly, I must technically reach out and touch his wings, taking a little bit of that, powder off their wings and now potentially interfering with their life. And so this is something this is a conversation I have with the kids all the time. Like, love things from a bit of a distance and learn to appreciate them from a distance. Learn to appreciate their space and let them hold their space. It's not because you can touch a butterfly that you should. And that, when you were talking about people going to the Mona Lisa, I think most people can't feel things unless they're so close to it that it's right there. Because that's the only time that they allow themselves to feel, because there's so many distractions between the Mona Lisa and the lineup that they don't dial in the moment. And some people are easily distracted. They just simply cannot focus on a single item and shut the world around them and go straight to it and draw from that item the vibe that they are seeking. And so I think that for them, it becomes a sort of an instinctual pattern to try to move as close as possible, because it actually increases a comfort level. Whereas if you're capable of sort of zeroing in and really feel the vibe and get what you need from that environment, not just the item itself, because the Mona Lisa by itself is just a Mona Lisa, but you're in the Louvre, like an amazing place, and you're in France, another amazing place, and you have all of those things, and it's kind of like being in a Russian doll, so to speak. You have all these layers of magnificence that you are tapping into, not just that simple moment of, I approached this so I could take a selfie with it, which is completely, in my opinion, negating and taking the moment away. So I'll give you an example of this for me, and this is just a personal story that I like to share from time to time. But many years ago, I was fortunate enough to travel to Jerusalem. And, there's a lot of historical facts in Jerusalem. There's a lot of religious facts in Jerusalem. And whatever side of my beliefs are really doesn't matter. What I understood that place to be is very important for some people that waited a lifetime on pilgrimage to go visit that place. I would not get close to certain things because that to me wasn't needed, but also it took space away from somebody that truly needed to be in close proximity to it. And it also, to a certain extent, disrespected the whole deal. You know, I didn't pay to be here. I'm here because of work. Now I get to be here. Fortunate enough. Now I'm going to move there, go to the stone table where allegedly, you know, Christ was laid to rest, and I'm going to touch it and just walk away. Yeah, take a selfie. You know, how disrespectful is that? And so whether or not this all happened, whatever, is inconsequential. The fact is, I don't have anything to gain from that, but I did gain a ton from being in the environment. I did gain a ton from being in Jerusalem, which is one of the oldest cities in the world. I've been gained a lot from the people around, all of those things. And so this is kind of where we need to self-regulate to a certain extent, but it takes some practice, and you need to be able to synchronize in the moment, and you need to be able to draw upon those vibes in the moment. And so start doing it with micro things, and eventually do it with macro things, and go out and practice. And the more you do it, the better you will be at doing that.
Like it, Shaun. What are you thinking?
I'm thinking that a good skill to have is be able to go from the macro to the micro back to the macro. I think that it's a good skill to be able to adjust your radar to a tight in view and to a really wide view. So as Seb was talking about Jerusalem, I was picturing myself. I've been there. I was picturing myself walking on my way to the Wailing Wall, which is like a micro moment where you will identify it as, I've got to go there. I've got to see that. That's a thing that needs to be done. And so that is the micro. But on my way there, if I hadn't have expanded my radar to the macro, I would have totally missed walking through the tight alleys with all the colors, all the scents, the incense smoke actually drifting across in front of me as the light comes down from that oblique angle later in the day, and I can see all of the things that can be seen. In fact, that alley, as I was walking through it, almost was more magnificent than the Wailing Wall. And that's only because I was macro and micro in accordance with what I needed to do in that moment. If all I would have done is have my nose, well, at the time that I was there was no Google Maps. But if I had have had my nose in Google Maps and that's it, that's all, I would have missed Jerusalem. I would have stood in front of a wall. I would have stood in front of where Christ was resurrected. I would have stood in like 10 spots, and Jerusalem wouldn't have been Jerusalem. It would have just been 10 spots. But I wouldn't understand the vibe of the city. I wouldn't understand the vibe of the back alleys. I wouldn't have understood the guy who was sitting on the three-legged stool lighting another piece of incense. I wouldn't have understood any of that. I'd have been oblivious to it if all I had was 10 spots in mind and I've got to go check the box on all of them. So the macro and the micro, back to the macro again, shifting your radar phase, I think is really important. Seb had mentioned the butterfly thing, reaching out and touching a butterfly, taking off some of the pollen or some of the coloring off its wing. As a kid, I was taught that if you do that, it hurts the butterfly and that it damages its ability to fly or not. I've never really looked into it to see if that's true or not, but that's what I was taught as a kid. And so therefore I try not to do a whole bunch of touching on butterfly wings. But as you were telling that story, it brought to mind, I was in the middle of the Tunisian desert, way, way down south, out in the middle of Nowheresville. Went out there by camel. Camels are down in a little bit of a lower gully, and I'm standing up on a desert ridge looking out into the middle of the desert, and all it was sand dune after sand dune after sand dune. As far as the eye could see, it was dunes. And so I was standing up next to someone, and they were about, I don't know, just a foot or two away from me. And off on the horizon, I saw this butterfly, and I didn't know it was a butterfly. I just saw motion right away. I target locked on it, trying to figure out what it was. It's so tiny that I couldn't determine what it was until it was real close to us. So the macro of the desert disappeared to the micro of the moment as I tried to figure out, what is that? And not too far away from me, I realized, oh, it's a butterfly. What the heck? That butterfly's flying right towards us in this massive desert. a humongous expanse of nothingness. And that butterfly flew right past my eyeball, just between myself and the other person, and kept on flapping. I tracked it fly past us, and all I could think was, on this entire desert of this expanse of nothingness, why did that, what the heck? That butterfly, what, it could have gone anywhere. I shouldn't have been able to see that butterfly because it should have been off doing its butterfly thing. But there it was all by itself, flying directly past my Mark 1 eyeball and continuing on as if it was a non-thing. And yet for me, it became a thing that I've never forgotten, because that butterfly, why was it there all by itself, flapping right past my head like a magnificent moment that I've never been able to forget? And so the macro to the micro, back to the macro, I've never forgotten that moment. I've never stopped thinking about that moment. And so the little moment of that butterfly became a big moment in my life, because I've never stopped considering the beauty of it, the randomness of it, the impactfulness of it, the meaning of it. And so a single butterfly can be richer than a novel. It can be more impactful than a movie. It can be lots of things depending on how you view the macro and the micro.
Yeah, the that's a great, beautiful story too, and it brings up a really good point. We don't have a ton of time to carry on this, but when I was young, living out in the country, one of the first things I got told about the animals was, if you see a baby bird that's fallen out of the nest, you don't touch it because the mother won't reassimilate it because you'll have too much scent on it. I know that's not true by any means now, but what it taught us at a young age was, don't interfere with the process. Allow nature to take its place. And especially out in the country, nature has its own process. You just have to allow things to happen in and of itself. And I think it's a great it's a great place to kind of wrap up this conversation, in terms of being able to be present in the moment enough to feel the process, what's happening around you, what is the natural order of the world in this moment, but then also to be able to manipulate some of the energies in that place to take you where you want to go in that moment. And I think that is it's a practice skill, and you have to be able to, like you said, micro, macro, micro, macro, and be able to play with the zoom button of your own consciousness, and be able to see, like, where do I need to look in this moment, and then utilize that skill set on a regular basis. Any final thoughts on that, or anything else that we've talked about today? It's been a fantastic conversation. We're 2.25 hours in. This has been awesome. Trav, start with you. Anything else?
Yeah, I think, what is the macro other than an accumulation of micros, and being able to take a step back, look at all of those micros in a larger picture, and get yourself a little bit of perspective, I think, is an important piece. But never forget that it's all those little steps, all those little things that make us who we are, that make our experiences what they are. And when people say, well, whatever it is that we've been talking about or that they see somewhere else, it doesn't work. I tried it. I read a self-help book, and it felt great for a bit, and then they, kind of wore off. Well, you need an accumulation of those micros. It's kind of like having a shower. You need to do that on a regular basis if you don't want to stink. You got to make sure you're putting the work and effort into yourself on the daily in a micro way, which will end up making a macro. And if we're going to experience things around us, realize if we're having a difficult time taking it all in, start small. Gradually move yourself a little bit bigger. And I guess a question that doesn't need to be answered would be, was that butterfly put there? Was there a reason that butterfly was there for Shaun? Or was there a reason that Shaun interpreted that butterfly in the way that he did? Doesn't really matter. the end result's going to be the same.
100%. Seb, any final thoughts?
Yeah, just quickly go back to something you said there, take it where you want to go. I never do that. I let it take me where it ought to go. So my mind is open, but I'm not guiding this. I'm not guiding this journey as far as the feeling that will be associated with a vibe, a certain vibe, because otherwise it's almost like bringing cognitive bias into the process. Like if I have, historical knowledge of those things, then I'm going to be crafting my own path. I don't want that. I want it to challenge me in a way, whether for good or bad, but I want to feel different. I want it to be external. And so dialing in the moment is what happens is me trying to connect with the moment, with the vibe, and where it brings me. And so to Travis's point here, what I would say is this: start questioning why the things in your life are impactful. When you experience something impactful, instead of going, oh, that was amazing, really tell me more about that. Break it down for me, like pieces to pieces, and you will start and flow on a piece of paper if you have to. Write everything about that moment that made that moment special. And you're gonna surprise yourself on how much more there is on that sheet that you can come up with in the moment. And now what you are doing is effectively recognizing all of the micro moments within that moment. Imagine how powerful that is, and imagine how it allows for a certain patternizing of things, and how you might be able to replicate, and how you might be able to seek, and how you might be able to pay attention more. I think that we oversimplify everything to keep it manageable for us. But take the time. This is a simple exercise. I love this. Why? Tell me more.
Love it. Shaun, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think going back to that butterfly moment as an example of a micro within a macro, immediately after that butterfly continued on its way, and I thought all of the thoughts that I thought, which I've been thinking about for 20 years or just over 20 years. And, every time I think about it in a different way. And so I have just a deep body of contemplation on a single butterfly. And so that is a way that you can run your life. It doesn't matter whether it was a butterfly or whether it was a moment on a plane where the plane went a little sideways, perhaps, and you had a moment where you thought, man, I got to change my life. I almost died there. I felt like we almost died. I got to change my life. Like when you start thinking these kind of things, when something gets in your mind's eye, when that occurs, it's time to not just let it slip by like that butterfly. You've got to hang on to that moment for decades, perhaps, to use as a guiding source to keep doing life a little bit better. Again, 20 years of thinking about that butterfly, I could have wiped all of that clean. I could have not had that contemplation moment if I would have simply done this. Cool, butterfly. Wonder what it was doing out here. Anyway, the individual that I'm hanging out here with, the bread is ready. We've got to go dig it out of the sand and brush off the sand and char and chow down for some evening food. That could have been the end of the day, and I'd never have thought about that butterfly for another second, and I'd be poorer for it. And so all of the simple things in life that are impactful in our life are easy to forget about if we don't spend another second contemplating them. So, I could write a book about that butterfly easily based on all the thought that I've put into it, but I never have, because there's so many other thoughts in front of our noses that we can engage in today, in the near future. Every day that we're given is another book that we can write in our minds if we dig into it, if we observe it rich enough, if we engage in it to a degree or to a level where the book writes itself in that day. the chapter after chapter after chapter, every hour is a chapter if you sink into the moment deep enough. But I don't think a lot of us do. I know I don't often enough. And I think it's distractions that cause that. I think it's the white noise of our modern society. I think it's easy to forget that every day is a book if you want to write that book. Every hour is a chapter if you want to write that chapter. But it's for us to kind of pick up the mindfulness pen and pay attention to the pen in our hand that's called our life and start writing a little bit deeper and richer.
I could not agree more. The medium doesn't matter either. It could be writing a book, could be taking a photo with your mind, it could be, you know, filming a video. The interesting part, as you were talking about the fact that you could write, you know, novel upon novel, book upon book of what you were talking about. When I really tune into the moments, I feel like I'm like I'm behind a director's screen. Like, so I picture how this would be a movie, and I start to think about, you know, the lighting and how the camera would move and how I would capture this in terms of a movie role. But I do love the fact that it really, at the end of the day, everything that we do, it's a choice. It's our choice. It's your choice. It is whether or not we want to engage in the world. That's up to us. Whether or not we want to learn about frequencies, that's up to us. Whether or not we want to dive deeper into a moment like that butterfly, it is up to us. And it is solely up to us, no one else. So I really do appreciate the conversation, guys. This has been absolutely fantastic. To all those that are watching, I would ask this: what are your thoughts? Put them down in the comments, engage us, and we will engage you, as that's what we're choosing to do. So I don't have a whole lot to say. I'm not going to end with the same thing we did last year because it's a totally new realm. So thank you guys very much for the conversation. We'll see you next time. Have a good night.